Chapter 16. It's almost scary how you seem to know what the Aegis is thinking before they do, Kieran grunted as he pushed the cart with a wheel of ward wire up the incline. Why can't the bay be at the top of the hill instead of the bottom? Gravity doesn't work that way, Kieran, Bram said, heaving next to him. Silver directed the cart from the front as they followed the procession of the Aegis Wardline team, working their way up to the new quarantine point. Every warden in Harbour's Edge was deployed now, standing guard at every alley and every door that might allow someone to escape the new quarantine zone. Even the Aegis regulars had been sent to ensure no one broke the quarantine, while Barton set up the new barrier. Barton had earned Silver's respect with his leadership. His decisions had been pragmatic, favouring function over propriety, a fact punctuated each time he grunted as he pushed the cart in front of them up the hill. The night before ended in rebellion. Bram and Kieran insisted that they rest. Silver had counted all 168 prime numbers up to 1,000, as she decoupled her mind from the compulsion to chase the frayed ends of the string leading to the Reaper's wife. Yes, every second counted. Yes, the likelihood that Greyrot would completely break containment increased each time Bram pulled in another rumbling breath as he slept. But they were all human, and humans needed sleep. She finally fell asleep, trying to calculate how much each of Bram's snores increased the likelihood that they would fail to identify the source of the plague. When she awoke, she realized that she had been too exhausted to dream. Apparently, she too was human. They left their cottage that morning to find the Wardline team already moving out. Fortunately, reclaimers traveled light, as their stipends rarely covered more than postage home. Their rations came from the same pantry that supplied the relief efforts. It was one reason the people they helped greeted them with a familiarity their Aegis counterparts never saw. The people knew the reclaimers didn't place their own needs above those they came to serve. That was also why Kieran was so pleased that their Aegis assignment came with full wages. They had earned as much working the Wardline as then the crews clearing Hellspawn to collect shards in Limbo, with almost none of the fighting. He was going to be heartbroken when Bram and Silver donated all but a tiny portion to the Reclaimers' General Fund. Their mission was expensive, and Kieran wouldn't keep his own share once he saw Silver and Bram drop their pouches off with the Reclaimers' Council. He tried to act tough, but he was as soft as yeast dough when it came down to it. Sweat dripped down Silver's neck, and she could feel the clothes under the plague gear soak through as they continued their trek up the hill. It wasn't her body that she was worried about, though. Barton needed to know about the Reaper's wife, and the possibility that there was a plague vector that didn't follow the usual spread patterns. If she could enlist the help of the Aegis in tracking her down, then the loose end could be tied up by the time the sun set. With their resources and the description from the civilians, no one could hide for long. She wasn't going to get his attention for at least a few hours, though. The logistics involved in moving all the equipment and assigning portions of the planned boundary to runesmiths would continue until evening. Fortunately for Silver, Barton would hold a meeting with only the runesmiths, so she would get her opportunity in about 5 hours. It was a longer delay than she would have liked, but it was all she was likely to get. "Bram," she said through a grunt, "if the Reaper's wife is real, what do you think makes her do it?" He was silent for a few moments. People don't usually set out with an evil thought. The robber leaves seeking bread and finds it at the expense of someone's dinner. The murderer might have sought that same bread, but encountered a challenge to his meal and ended up killing to eat it. Usually, it starts with desperation, followed by escalation and compromise. What I don't understand is what she would gain from getting people sick. I understand a hungry man, but it's harder for me to understand this. Perhaps she is seeking revenge. Maybe she has lost her mind. She could even have been forced by some means. She shouldn't have remained contagious for this long, though. Some manner of sorcery or alchemy must be involved. Honestly, if I could choose anyone to answer that question, it would be you. Silver smiled. The big man was quick to defer to her judgment anywhere but in a fight. There, he was confident, but she knew he didn't enjoy taking the lead. He was happy to let someone else point at the target he needed to hit or defend. Still, He was smarter than he gave himself credit for. He had perspective that most didn't, the kind of perspective that came with scars. The new ward line started about 2 miles up the hill. The city held almost 500,000 people, and this expansion meant that almost a third were quarantined. The math said that 30 to 50,000 would die. It made her sick. As soon as Silva crested the incline, porters arrived to take the cart to the location associated with the code on the crates secured to the top. The operation was organized. She didn't know who the plague marshal was. She had never witnessed one of his rare appearances. But the supplies never stopped moving, even when they changed hands. She took in the large square now that they had reached their destination. Tents ringed a circular intersection of cobbled roads. Steam tram tracks bent around a small decorative fountain in the center, and she could now see the harbor and bay below, the water glistening unperturbed by what was happening ashore. Aegis administrators sat behind desks, shaded by open-walled tents, their sides rolled up to allow the wind to pass beneath. One tent bore a sign promising housing assignments, so Silva walked over and joined the line. The streets were wholly cobbled there, a contrast which struck Silva as she waited. She scanned the walls of the apartments and buildings around her, noting that stone had replaced wood and small planters of flowers dotted each balcony or window, giving the grey stone pops of color. The wealthier citizens of the city must be apoplectic that the plague had dared spread so close to their part of harbor's edge. "Name, rank, and assignment, please," the clerk asked. He didn't even look up, not that he needed to. He couldn't tell one soldier from another when they were wearing plague gear. "Silva Kren," she said, sliding him Barton's writ over for him to inspect. "A bunch of pumped-up greycoats in Class 2 housing?" he said, as though the words tasted of ash. "What a waste of bedding. I'm sure they'll burn the bedding when you leave. If you sad lot wouldn't sleep in barns so often, you might not carry so many fleas." "Your assistance is appreciated," Silva said, not caring enough to respond further. She returned to Bram and Kieran, who held their rucksacks. She tossed Kieran the keys to their new apartment and handed Bram the map. "You two go ahead and settle us into the townhouse. I'll be up after my meeting." "A townhouse," Kieran said, noting the cut of the key. "I'll bet it has a balcony." Bram ignored him and looked at Silva, clenching his jaw. "Will you be all right? I should probably stay." "Go on," Silva said. "I'll be fine. We are in the middle of the command post. There are plenty of soldiers to save me in your absence if I walk into trouble." "I'm more worried about you talking your way into trouble," he said, cracking a slight grin. Silva slapped his shoulder, sending him on his way. A jest from Bram. She didn't know if that was a good omen or a bad one. She spent the next hour walking around the square, venturing up and down the ward line, noting that security was just as tight as they had promised. The soldiers were stationed close together, with orders to kill anyone who tried to break quarantine. The citizens had grumbled when they read the news about how swift, severe, and permanent the punishment was for trying to cross the new ward line. Silva saw the logic in it. This kind of heavy-handedness encouraged the unerring compliance they needed when another breach meant another 15,000 deaths. When it was time, she entered the command tent with the rest of the runesmiths. The tent was large enough to be divided into 2 rooms. The first room had 2 administrators supporting Barton and gatekeeping visitors. The administrators nodded to each runesmith as they passed, having memorized their faces by now. Barton stood next to a table and bent over a map of the city. The new quarantine zone was familiar, the white boxes representing blocks having been shaded red to show they were lost to grey rot. Barton stared at them, as if his attention could wash the red ink from the parchment. "I have drawn your names next to the section of ward line you are responsible for erecting," he said in a tired voice. "There are going to be some changes. Understand that this comes from the top, and I do not have the ability to grant the flexibility some of you have become accustomed to." He looked directly at Silva, and she swallowed, knowing that the orders stacked neatly on his desk would make what she needed to do decidedly more difficult. "Your housing assignment will be within a few minutes' walk of your assignment." Each of you has over a mile of ward wire to lay, and you have 3 days to do it. This is the reality of our task. For the next 3 days you will do almost nothing but carve runes, eat, and sleep. The Aegis has budgeted 3 hours and 15 minutes of sleep starting 1 hour from now. It will take some of you that long to get to your accommodations, so I recommend heading that direction as soon as this meeting concludes. Food will be brought to you. 2 wardens have been assigned to you, so you can take your masks off to eat. We have amended plague protocol for the runesmiths to maximize the amount of time you can spend working. Be advised, they received their orders directly from the marshal, and have been told to guard you to make sure nothing and no one distracts you from your task. So, we are to be prisoners? One of the other runesmiths asked. Mission-critical assets is the term they are using, Barton said with a humorless smile. But to your point, I am sure your minders would prefer you not wander off, at least for the next 3 days. Things will probably lighten up once the barrier is set. Probably, he says, the runesmith said, with a dark chuckle of his own. Your orders will be handed to you as you leave, Barton said, ignoring the man. Good luck, team. Know that without you this city would have no chance. The insult of assigning wardens to watch you isn't lost on me. Just remember that everyone is counting on you to do your jobs. I am counting on you. Everyone in the organization needs the quarantine to work this time. This city is important to the Aegis, and anyone in command will face consequences if we fail. Everyone is under a tremendous amount of pressure. Barton saluted, dismissing them. Major Barton, Silver said, approaching him. Kren. I don't have time for this, Barton replied, rubbing his face. It's important, she said. He didn't speak, so she continued, taking his silence as permission. The day we met, I was walking the ward line, inspecting the runework for mistakes. I saw a woman handing coins out to children. It struck me as odd at the time, but after speaking with some of the parents of those kids, I believe that they not only suffered the most severe cases of grey rot, but they were the first cases when the quarantine broke. The rumors are a little sensationalized, but I believe, Kren, if you say the words Reaper's wife in the next sentence, I am under strict orders to have you arrested for spreading misinformation. Sir? I don't care what you call her. I think she is real, Silver said, heat rising up her neck. She knew that it would be difficult to get leave approved, but blatantly disregarding potential contagion vectors offended her. Silver, I like you. I think you know that. You are clearly smart. I have looked into your records, and it is clear to me that you sometimes confuse thinking you're right with having permission to act as you see fit. The thing is, I wasn't lying earlier. We can't afford any distractions. I can't afford any more scrutiny. This is why I requested 4 guards instead of 2 to be your shadows. And those are only the guards that I am telling you about. I do not have enough runesmiths, and you, Silver, are a damn good runesmith. I don't care what some snooty researcher wrote about you for the next 3 days. You will do your job, and you won't be distracted by theories and conjecture. There are people assigned to find out how it's breaking containment. You aren't one of them. Silver could see that she wasn't going to get anywhere with him. He was a reasonable man, but his back was against the wall. There was only one thing she could do now. Trust her team. If she couldn't go meet the Death Watchers, one of them would have to go in her stead. She didn't like that it wouldn't be her, but she couldn't help smiling while picturing the broomhead that stopped Greyrot from touching her. She would never admit it to Bram or Kieran, but it was nice knowing there were at least 2 people in Tel Nera she could count on. Still, Barton's accusation grated at her. He wasn't a bad man. Honestly, he was better than most. But like most men in positions of authority she dealt with, he was blinded by his own pig-headed commitment to what he saw as the right answer. She had made no oath that she would build their wards forever. She had not enlisted. She was there to stop Greyrot, nothing else. The runework had seemed like the best way to accomplish that, until she learned of the Reaper's wife. Now he meant to force her to follow what he thought was best. Silver licked her canine, as she smiled, feeling its sharp edge. No. Barton and Dornman had made the same flawed assumption. No one, man or woman, could convince her to follow their lead on the merit of their position alone. If she saw a better solution to the problem, their paths would diverge. If they wanted to stop her, they could all find out who was right once the dust settled. Her true friends wore grey, and they would help her stop Greyrot from taking Harbour's Edge.